agency about how you're probably not going to do anything. Now, as far as I know, you're supposed to be supervising people who, as far as I can tell, are working with the federal government to deny people their entitlements. Well, that's entirely accurate from my point of view, and from the over a dozen people who I've had to represent at Social Security appeals, because they can't find an attorney, and legal aid won't take care of them. Mostly, I believe, because of racial or ethnic or economic reasons. Look, the thing is, I am a journalist. Now, in 1983, I found out that Genesis Health Systems, then Mercy Hospital, same deal, was throwing people out of their emergency rooms who had acute problems that needed to be stabilized. And in all of those years, a lot of people have died because they have been kicked out of the emergency room, and there's a federal law and there's a state law against it. And I started writing about this on the web. And at that point in time, the state of Illinois tried to commit me 3 times because of the things that I was saying, which were true. And I backed those things up with federal documents, state documents, and videotape. Mr. Eisler, I used to be a wealthy guy. I was beaten up by 2 pigs at a bar because I had long hair and a beard. And I got almost $500,000 in punitive damages alone because of the way the local hospital treated me. Now, in 4 years since I got out of federal prison, and the Supreme Court released me, sir, because it's not against the law to write the truth. And now I'm about to publish some truth about your agency, that you are paid by the federal government to supervise and distribute money to state legal aid systems, which specifically work with the federal government to deny people their entitlements. And this has been happening to me since the last century. I have a series of documents, almost a dozen of them. I received them from Iowa Public Aid. What Iowa Public Aid did was to take the federal documents and ignore them, because public aid isn't supposed to take my word for anything. They have to contact Social Security to find out how much I'm getting. And what they started to do many, many, many years ago is they would say that I'm getting $500 more than I'm actually getting, and saying I'm not entitled to food stamps. In addition, my Medicaid card disappeared last year. The local public aid office, who's ticked at me, and they've been ticked at me for over 20 years, because at that time I had a friend who was living at the time, and her name was Nettie Clemens. Nettie had been a psychiatric patient all of her life. She gets a letter from the director of the public aid works in Davenport saying they're going to cut off her Section 8 housing. Now, I had been in the system for a while, and by the way, I was in the system for a while against my will, because Legal Aid in Davenport signed me up with that system against my will. I told them I didn't want an appeal. If Social Security didn't want to take care of this, that's fine. I had parents and friends. And when push came to shove, I find out that Social Security saddled me with a disability that I don't really have. And because they determined I had a disability that I didn't really have, in spite of medical reports and testing that was done, which indicated that if they wanted to give me disability payments, they should have at least chosen the right disability. They should have at least gotten a correct diagnosis. But they didn't want to do that. And because of that, I couldn't get any rehabilitative services. I had to pay for those myself. And when the lawsuit was coming to fruition, the hospital charged... I'm on the phone. I can't talk! I'm on the phone!
Don't fucking holler at me, prick.
So anyway, look, what's happened is a travesty.
Don't keep hollering at me. I'm gonna bust in your fucking mouth one of these days.
And you know, right now I'm living in a room with no door on it. My landlord rented to a guy who's of questionable character. And he wants to talk to me when he wants to talk to me, and I'm on the phone. I have to tell him I'm on the phone, and then he threatens me. You know, I'm going to have to kill somebody before too long because I'm tired of this. Now, look, my personal problems are not your personal problems, but my legal problems are your personal problems because you guys are screwing me around. You're letting Alex Cornea screw me around.
Just gonna tell you, Tom found his dog. You ain't gotta worry about it.
Well, I'm glad Tom found... You know, Why don't you come in here so I can run you through? In any case, look, I have been starving for 4 years. I can't get medical attention. Janelle Swanberg promised me she was going to get me medical attention, but apparently what she did was work out a deal with hospital authorities and with the hospital's attorneys. And when I went to the hospital under her direction, just to pick up a referral to nuclear medicine outside of this area, I was beaten up, I was held for 10 hours, and my Medicare was drained for almost $5,000. I didn't receive any treatment, and I didn't get my referral, but I did get a beating. Right now, I'm making a videotape of me sitting on a pad, which is where I have to sleep, because in the morning I can't get up because this pig really hurt me when he beat me. I can't get a prescription for pain pills. I can't get any kind of therapy. I can't get a referral to nuclear medicine, and I weigh less than 100 pounds. For 3 years, people in your offices told me that and you know, I've been in the food stamp program for a long time, and I happen to know that the amount you pay for rent has a direct effect on the amount of food stamps you receive. So why are people in your offices all of a sudden telling me that that doesn't make any difference how much money I'm paying in rent? They're not supposed to do that. Huh? Well, you're supposed to supervise those offices, aren't you? Oh, well, federal regulations obviously mean that if you're on a federal program and the feds don't like what you've written about them online, that they can just stop you, and legal aid's not going to do anything. In fact, what legal aid will do is they will tell you a lie, something like, well, your rent payment doesn't have anything to do with how many food stamps you get. You know that's not true, don't you? See, this is a direct question that I'm asking a guy, and he's not answering it. You know that's not true, don't you, Mr. Eisler? I can't hear you.
Mr. Silverwell?
Yeah. That's my name. Don't wear it out. The question is this. You know that that a food stamp amount, the amount you receive, is directly connected to how much of your Social Security check you have to pay to keep a roof over your head. You know that, don't you?
I am not fully aware aware of the...
Well, then what you should do, since you are in charge of state programs, you're supposed to supervise state programs, which are concerned with those kind of things. Don't you think it might be part of your job to find out something about those programs?
But the thing is, you have an issue with Iowa legal aid.
No, I have an issue right now with you. I have an issue right now. I have an issue with LSC.
Oh, okay.
Okay, now as far as you told me you're supposed to make sure these people behave in an ethical manner, aren't you?
No, the ethics part was referred to the Iowa Judiciary Commission, which I sent you the contact information for.
I have been told that if I contact the Iowa Judiciary Commission, that Mr. Cornea is going to drop my case. Can he do that? Can he do that? If I contact the Judiciary Commission, can Alex Cornea drop my Social Security issue?
I don't know, but is Mr. Cornea...
You don't know? You don't know? How can you not know? You're supposed to be the guy who's answering my questions. If you can't answer my questions, I'm going to have to talk to your supervisor. What's your supervisor's name?
Laura Rath.
Excuse me?
Laura Rath.
What's his whole name?
That's the whole name.
Spell it.
I'm sorry?
Spell the man's name, first and last.
It's not a man.
Spell the woman's name, first and last.
Her first name is L-O-R-A.
L-O-R-A.
Last name R-A-T-H.
R-A-T-H. And what is her direct line?
I can't give that to you.
Oh, really? Now, okay, now, who is Mr. Sandman? Who is Mr. Sandman?
He's the president of the Legal Services Corporation.
Really? Jim Sandman, I would have thought that was a fake name. Now, how do I get a hold of Mr. Sandman?
I'm not sure.
Well, you should be sure.
Well,
Doesn't he sign your checks or something like that? Don't you work for him?
let me see if there's a contact information.
There ought to be a goddamn contact information because you don't even know the answer to one pertinent question I'm asking you, and your supervisor apparently wants to duck their calls.
Well, I'm going to have to ask you, watch your language, please.
What did I say?
You use an expletive.
Well, this is some pretty horrendous business you're doing. You're telling me that we will supervise people who are unethical. And you really do need that if you're going to cut people off their federal entitlements. If you're going to help the federal government do that, then you really need that kind of a policy. Now, I've been told by a guy who has done nothing for 4 years. And I have to depend on this guy because in 1996, I had won too many appeals for too many people. You've got the people in your Davenport office throw people out of their office based on their race and their ethnicity. I've witnessed it. When I handled Wanda Butler's case, I became aware of the fact that after Wanda Butler had reported when she was a child that her payee was selling her, selling her as a sex toy, that the local office refused to deal with Wanda Butler at that point and chose to only deal with a person who the Justice Department and the Department of Census told Social Security lied on a federal document, was not the child's mother, and they would have to find another payee. But Social Security refused to do that. Instead, they sent Ruth Butler a letter saying that if she took a test and could show the possibility of maternity, because, way back then there was no DNA testing, that they would just make her the payee, no questions asked. And Ruth Butler refused to take that test. And it doesn't take a Mensa candidate to figure out what that means. Yet, 29 years later, Ruth Butler was given over $100,000 from that escrow account that was supposed to go to Wanda Butler. Unfortunately, Ruth Butler used it to supply her real children with drugs that they sold on the street. I got videotapes of that happening. And I got videotapes of area police who are helping these scumbags sell interstate drugs. That's why I went to prison. I didn't do anything illegal, and eventually I was released by the Supreme Court. However, you people are allowing this to continue. My attorney refuses to do anything to move this case from the place where it's been frozen. I weigh less than 100 pounds. I was told 4 years ago that Janelle Swanberg was going to get me into some kind of relevant medical procedure. And the only thing that she wants to do is make it so that I get locked in an institution. During my trial where I got a bunch of money, it was pretty much proven in a civil court that I don't have any psychological problems, except people like you. Now, my complaint, my problem is now with your agency, who apparently isn't concerned with the ethics that the people use, who you are supposed to be supervising. Yet you are paying people, you're giving people money who want to be unethical, instead of having them fired, and collecting people in these offices who care about the disenfranchised, the underprivileged, the crippled, the lame, the halt, the orphan, the widow. What they care about is a person's skin color, or their nationality, or the fact that they help the federal government deny people their entitlements, and that's just the way it is. It's all a show. That's why I got a problem with you right now. Now, I'm going to need the contact information for Mr. Sandman.
This is the complaint line. Do you have a complaint?
Yeah, I need to talk to Mr. Sandman. What's his number? What's his address?
I don't have his number.
Find it. I think you can find it. No, I'm not writing a letter. Mr. Eisler, I am not writing a letter to you. I'm writing a letter to the head honcho.
And his address is the same as mine.
Good. Now, do I have to send that letter registered? Because I'm going to expect an answer from this son of a bitch.
Once again, watch your language.
So, if I want to write to Mr. Sandman, what's the address?
3333 K Street, Northwest, Washington, D.C.
K Street. Just a moment. I'm doing this by hand, okay?
It's on the letter I sent you. You have the letter, right? It's the same address.
Well, I can't find that document right now. Please give me the address. 333 K Street.
Yeah.
E-E-T, Washington, D.C.
Yes.
Washington. And the zip code?
0007.
So I address that to Jim Sandman, 333 K Street, Washington, D.C. I'm going to be sending it registered. I'm going to expect an answer from him.
It's K Street Northwest.
Now I don't. Now, if this guy works with your legal firm, why can't you connect me with him? Now,
I have for him is the same number you've been calling.
well, the thing is, I need to talk to the guy at the top of the triangle now because you can't answer my questions, and your supervisor won't talk to me because she probably doesn't know what's going on either. You got to know the look. If you want to supervise people who are doing specific things, don't you think you should make yourself cognizant of rules and regulations? Don't you think you should actually be in a position to supervise somebody? When somebody has a legal complaint with an agency, like say Legal Aid in Iowa is supposed to have a complaint on my behalf with Social Security. Don't you write a letter when they decide to shelve your appeal and not look at it for way longer than the rules and regulations allow them to do that? Shouldn't your attorney get on the phone and alert some people to the fact that his client's going to die if he doesn't get medical? His client's going to die if he's only receiving $1 a day in food stamps to live in. The people you're supposed to supervise told me point blank that if I'm paying $400 a month in rent, that doesn't have anything to do with what I receive in food stamps. And that's just not true. Now, as far as I know, you just told me that, well, we don't have anything to do with their ethical behavior, but you pay them. You give them money.
I told you that we did not have oversight over that. It went to the judiciary first.
I have been told. Well, then you're going to have to make. Well, then maybe you should. Well, look, Alex Cornea told me that if I call the judiciary or make any kind of complaint, along those lines, with say the Attorney Disciplinary Board, or with the Judicial Qualifications Commission, or anything like that, he's going to drop my case. And you can't even tell me that if he can or can't do that. Now that's
If he's not doing anything, why haven't you complained?
because he told me if I complained, he'd drop my case.
But if nothing's happening on the case.
Oh, you mean if nothing's happening on the case, I should just entice the guy to release you from any kind of responsibility you have? No, I ain't going to do that. You have a responsibility, dude. You have to make sure that people here are getting legal services. And if they're not, then you got to do something about that. And if you're allowing people that you're paying money to lie to their clients, to obfuscate their attempt to get their full entitlement, you don't seem to care. And that's because you're getting paid by the federal government, aren't you? And there's a conflict of interest there, isn't there? Anyway, I really appreciate your appearance on my website program. You'll be able to see this tape in short order, Mr. Eisler.
Okay.
Now, I would suggest that you call Alex Cornea and you tell him to get his ass in gear and get me my checks, the full amount of my checks, and get me my retro check. And then I want you to call up Janelle Swanberg, and I want you to ask her why she set me up for a beating in a local hospital. And this hospital's got a really interesting history. People die in that hospital. Actually, they don't die in the hospital. They're refused emergency medical services, and then they die. And there's a record of that with Iowa courts. Apparently, grandpa's worth anywhere between $100,000 and $2 million. I would think that it would be cheaper for a hospital to obey state and federal laws and stabilize people, whether or not they can show proof of insurance. Not having an insurance card does not deny you the ability of going to a hospital and getting emergency services. But in the state of Iowa, it does. Both the federal government and the state government refuse to enforce that law. And now I'm working with a state agency that gets paid by a federal agency that is supposed to be in some position of oversight, and now you're telling me you don't even care if these people lie to your clients. I don't think the public's going to understand your attitude. Have a nice day. This is Dmitry Ivanovich with the Naked Truth.